Any good game master knows that prep is everything. But first, what the heck are we even prepping for? What is a session zero? At its core, in its gooey soul essence, session zero is the session that happens before the first session of play, hence its clever name. And what it does is set expectations at your gaming table, both in and out of game. But most importantly, it gives the players a chance to set their expectations for their game master, and it gives the game master a chance to set expectations for players. Now, it goes without saying that every campaign is different, there's no right way to play, and different strokes for different folks. But this is more of a 30,000-foot view. So if I say something that you think just doesn't fit at your table, cross it off the list, don't worry about it. But if you think that I'm missing anything that is crucial, feel free to say so in the comments below. I try not to start my world building until after session zero so that I can let my players weigh in a little bit on what they want. But even with that aside, you still are going to need to do some light prepping, but don't worry, it's nothing compared to your legendary world building. First, let's start with the basics. You're gonna need character sheets and a line of communication. It's really that simple. Are your players going to be using pen and paper character sheets, or will you be using an online platform like D&D Beyond? In addition to that, are you only gonna be using text, or will you use a gaming server like Discord? In my opinion, it's important to set that up immediately so that the players can get a taste for exactly how you're going to be communicating and exactly how they're going to be keeping their notes. Getting that set up before the very first session, or even before the very first session, is crucial. Once you have those character sheets and that line of communication set up, step number 2 is to make sure that you know when you're going to meet and how often. And normally I'll host my session zero on the first of that schedule. That was a lot of quotes. Here's an example of what that means. My players' best day to meet are Thursdays and Sundays. So I know that we're gonna meet every Sunday, play bi-weekly, and hopefully have about a 4-hour session. So I'm gonna make sure that we start off on that schedule right, and that I get the right taste in their mouths, and that we can get into the groove of things. And so my session zero is gonna be on Sunday when we're normally meeting. That way you start off on the right foot, and those expectations are already set. So, we know how we're keeping track of our characters. We know how we're going to communicate with each other. We're sitting down and we're ready to do session zero. What's first? Well, I'm glad you asked. It's character creation. Are there any limitations that your players have? Do they only play with raw, or do they have access to any materials within the game that you're playing? What if a player says, I saw this really sweet homebrew build on Reddit and I think it freaking slaps? Will you slap them for bringing up this overpowered monstrosity at your table? Or will you humor the idea and let them bring it to you? It's things like this that we're going to discuss at character creation. In addition to the limitations that you may be putting on them, it's also a great opportunity for the DM to help the players create their characters with a little bit of help, guidance, and a little know-how into where the story might go. For instance, I'm not going to punish my ranger for wanting to pick dragon as their favorite enemy, because I might know that I'm not dealing with any dragons in the campaign, or this also gives me the opportunity to know that I should be writing them into it. Something that I like to do in character creation is make all of my players connect their characters' backstories. In my opinion, this does a lot of things. It starts the story off on a right foot, and in addition to that, it gives new and veteran players alike some roleplay to really sink their teeth into. You may have noticed that I slid ever so slightly to the side. Keen eye. Your passive perception must be high. Sorry, I didn't know it was gonna rhyme when I started saying it. I've made some room beside me for a list of things that we're going to go over during character creation. If you're taking notes, when you should pause the video, there'll be a pause button right here. Wow. When you see that, that means pause the video if you're still taking some notes from any of my lists. During character creation, you're going to link character backstories, talk about player secrets that they do and don't want to share, connect characters through narrative, backstories, or their personalities. You're going to talk about min-maxing. Is it something that you're going to allow at your table? Party balance. Is that important to you? Or do you not care if everybody is a wizard and they're all high up on the rocks casting spells from afar? Because That actually sounds pretty fun. PC secrets. How are they going to be shared about the table? How are you going to communicate those things? Alignment. Do you really care about alignment, or do you want to get in depth with it and talk to your players about their role play through that, and all of the things that we mentioned before, which are backstories that are personal to each player, backstories that are shared through players, and personalities and backgrounds. Where did everyone come from? And does anybody need any help building their PC? We've set up lines of communication. We've agreed on a meeting time. We've created doomed avatars for the game. So what's next? Let's set some expectations for the players and the game master alike. For instance, I'm considered a hard mode DM. That's because I'm unforgiving and I let my players' actions have consequences, and I also believe in letting the dice fall where they lie. Now, what that's going to look like is my players are going to know that if they stumble upon a sleeping Cyclops and they decide to slap his butt cheek because it's funny, which it is, this Giantkin is not going to be happy, and I'm not going to pull any punches because you were just goofing off. They know that their actions have consequences. They know that they're probably going to get into a fight that's over their heads and that they shouldn't have initiated. But it covers far more than that. There are a lot of expectations to set at the table outside of difficulty. This is the time to let your players chime in on exactly what they're expecting out of you and out of a campaign, and I have heard it all. Things like frogs, no. Ninja frogs with political intrigue. You know, like people frogs, like they can stand up and they have politics. It's a great opportunity for your players to tell you what they're expecting in a campaign and for you to tell them what you expect of them as players. Oh yeah, I've scooted over and you've caught on. You know what time it is. It's list time. Here are the essential things to cover when talking game expectations. What are the players looking for in a game? Is this campaign going to be linear, or is it going to be sandbox? Perhaps a mixture of both? What are the players expecting and what are they hoping for? What do the players look for in a story? Romance, political intrigue, horror, gore? Are there any themes you'd like to see in the story that we haven't gone over? How interested are the players in combat versus roleplay, and how do you expect to balance those things? Will PvP be allowed? In my campaign, it's a hard no. I think that the players can discuss outside of forcing the barbarian to fight the wizard whether or not they're going to take the quest. Snacks, drink, and booze. My favorite topic. Will we be eating together? Are snacks allowed? And are we going to be drinking alcohol while we play? If so, what are the limits on drinking alcohol? Here's an important one. Are distractions allowed at the table? Cell phones, taking calls, talking outside of game. I absolutely do not allow cell phones. Obviously, I know that there are some exceptions, but for the most part, I want no distractions at my table. However, I do allow table talk where we step out and we communicate with each other out of character. Unannounced dice rolls. If a player rolls, happens to get a natural 20, are they allowed to say it was a perception check, or do they have to announce before the roll? DM style. I'm a hyper-descriptive DM who talks a lot about gore in combat. Some players, that makes them uncomfortable and they want shorter descriptions, which is fine. I just need to know about it. Tardies and absences. If you don't make it, will we play without you or will we reschedule? How are we going to deal with absences? The way that I like to do it is I award players with inspiration to give each other if they're on time. Leveling on time, very important at my games. You show up leveled or you don't level at all, because we only have a little bit of time to play. And as an adult playing with adults, you don't always have the opportunity to make that time. So it really is like a precious little golden phoenix egg that you and your players share. Do you want to role play shopping? Or do you want to do shopping out of game? Yeah. How long is the campaign going to go on for? Some people want to play for a decade, while others only want to play for about 3 months at a time. And while we're on that subject, what levels will we play through? Some players build their PCs to max out and reach their true potential at level 9, and it'd be a real disappointment to find out that's never going to happen 2 years later when you're really not having any fun. Social contracts. What the heck are those? Doesn't sound complicated at all, right? Wrong. They're really actually not that complicated. You're right. But it is important that we go over them. It's setting expectations at the table, but with a little tweak. I promise never to use any racist or homophobic speech in any of my videos. Simple as that. We've got a social contract going. I've made you a promise about the social expectations between the two of us, and I plan on keeping it. Once more, I scoot to the side to make room for the list. Social contracts apply both in and out of game. Things like, what are some themes that we can see and what are themes we're staying away from? What is okay to talk about at the table and what is absolutely off the table as far as conversation? In addition to that, how are we going to settle disagreements as a team? You're going to want to talk about some things like gore, like sexual relationships with PCs and NPCs. Things like sexual assault. Is it going to be in your campaign? Slavery. Does that bother anybody? Because there are a lot of slave overtones in a lot of different role-playing games. Hate speech. Do you allow it at all? How are you going to be approaching gender and gender identity? Anything that you leave out, now is the opportunity to let the players chime in. Things like maybe you didn't bring up gore and they just really can't stand the sight of blood and they can't picture themselves imagining it as you're playing through the campaign. Does the DM have final say in disputes? How much wiggle room is there for disputing rules, and how long will you let it go on? And making it clear that when the GM sets a ruling and has to put their foot down, it's just to move the game forward and not to upset anyone's feelings. But everyone needs to be in agreement on these things and on the tape that is around them. Last, and by no means least, it's important to talk about the mechanics that you are going to be using when you are playing the game. What do I mean by that? Well, are your players familiar with exactly how combat works in the system that you're playing? Do they know how to use their skills? Do they know how to use their spells? It's important that everybody understands how to play the game that you're playing. Mechanics to go over at session 0 include things from the basics all the way to homebrew rules that you're going to be using. Some people like to call them house rules. I call them that. I just forgot to say it while I was explaining it to you. It's important to go over the basics first, like types of actions, cover, speed, what combat's going to look like, and how skill checks are going to play out. Experience, how are you going to be awarding that? Will it be numbers that you earn for every battle and every encounter, or is it going to be based on milestones and the DM will just announce when the party levels up as a whole? PvP. Are you going to really allow that? I suggest you don't. Usually just ends up in players arguing with one another. Resurrection. How available is it in your game? Are you going to allow your players to get reckless, die, and then just go see a priest and come back? Will you allow players to use the resurrection spell? Inspiration. How does it get awarded in your game? How does it even work? What does it do? Does the GM award inspiration for telling a funny joke, for role-playing perfectly, or for bringing food for everyone? If they're bringing food, give them inspiration. In my game, for instance, I let the players give each other inspiration. Everybody gets a token at the beginning of the game, and they get to hand them out. It's also important in this moment to talk about any house rules you might have. One of mine, for instance, is the cheese in it rule. If a player gives another inspiration when they're in a time of need instead of when they deserve it, I don't allow it because that's obviously breaking the system. Resting. How is that going to work? Do you allow short rest and long rest as the game dictates? Do the rests heal the party all the way to full? Now, I know that I mentioned resurrection, but it is still important to go over death with PCs because some people aren't ready for their PC to die and assume that there is a way out of it. So you need to let them know if it's time to roll another one or if death is permanent and how hard is it going to be. And then there's a few other things to talk about as far as mechanics. Material components. Do you really keep up with those for spells? Arrows, are you going to make your players shop for those and keep count? And coins, encumbrance, all of these things. You need to make sure that you're all on the same page. Page. But going over these things ensures that you're going to have the smoothest playing experience possible and that nobody is going to come in and rules lawyer you. You're officially ready to have your first session 0. You're welcome. But no session 0 is going to be perfect. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Some rules are meant to be bent. Some rules are meant to be broken. Respect your players and trust that they're going to respect you. And I promise that you're going to have a good time. Thanks for joining. If you have anything to add, throw it in the comments below. If you liked this video, like and subscribe. You know the drill. You've probably seen YouTube videos before. Thanks for joining me. I'll catch you on the next one.